You hear me now? um, yep. Oh yeah, I'm registering. Nice. I overfiltered myself. Professional streamer here, folks. Really. Uh, I almost said professional streamer because streaming has actually paid me more than writing books has so far. Oh, on the other side though, I've also paid more for streaming than I have for books. But it is Friday night, and that is time for fairy tales. Because that's what we do here. We do love ourselves some stories, and we tell as many as we can. Can anyone hear the fan, or is that just me? I'm not talking to you, Kel. Bugger off. Just stay there and do alert messages and such. So, I will say that this is the first stream with an actual USB microphone as opposed to just my headset mic. And we will have to see how things go. Because stuff and such. Lots of nonsense. Where am I? Why do I keep shrinking? I do not want me to shrink just because I lean forward and back in my chair. But if you notice, I am back to my old setting. Because again, I had to restart OBS. Luckily, there was a cloud saving from when I had set things up in mid-August, so I got to at least update to that point. But I still need to redo all of my other rooms and settings and such, but at least I got most of my stuff restored. But it is September 15th, which means 9 days until I completely throw myself into a panic and try to do the streamathon. Subathon. And there's a Stunfisk. If anyone is here to try to catch it. Hey, catch, can you hear me typing? Because I can hear me typing. And it's going to drive me patty coda. Boom. Okay. Where was I? Anyway, new microphone. I personally think I sound a little bit tinny, but I'm also... This is a compression mic, so you'll get that. It is a cardioid, so I can speak over it and it'll pick me up better instead of having to have it angled or anything at me. As opposed to the headset microphone, which was, for lack of a better term, kind of horseshit. And I'm actually still worried about the headset even working properly anymore, because I've gotten the cable jerked a few times between me and the cats, and it's still a little bit static. In fact, hold on, let me promise. Give me an extended note, and I can hear this better. So, natural voice tone is an A. Just open, throat, relax. So, here we go. I could have probably held a little bit longer, but I didn't see any reason to. I was hearing the crackling in my headset anyway. Which just means, damn. If anyone's feeling generous, I have both a new headset and a probably considerably better microphone on my phone list. So. And I may or may not be drinking sangria. This is my water bottle. Which I will carefully put down because putting my water bottle back down yesterday is what caused one of my headphone pulls. But we're here for Terry. We're here for Terry fails. I'm not drunk. Why am I always sounding like it? Admittedly, it is Friday night, and I am reading story tales instead of having a social life. Oh, you guys are my social life. No one's here, so I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Anyway, we got a book. You'll probably hear me turning pages in full ASMR mode because the microphone picks up pretty damn well. Now we have, let's see, we're on page 606 right now. The end of the book is not cut very well. 626. No, 726. Ah. I have not been drinking alcohol much this evening. So we've got 120 pages left of this particular book of fairy tales. What will we do after? Will we continue regular fairy tales or will we go actual book? I kind of like the book notion. I could whip out Alice in Wonderland. Whip Alice in Wonderland. I don't know. I'll figure out what's going on. I'll probably put up another poll on my Twitter. I did that with the Sherlock Holmes books. That's why we're halfway through Valley of Fear now. So, because Valley of Fear was voted on as the next one to read, and we are not going to the forest. We are going to the library. So let's get over there, shall we? I am not in my chair. Why am I not in my chair? What the hell? Okay. Anyway, if you see down here at the bottom, it says, what can September do? Oh. Why did that taste like pizza? I haven't had pizza for over a week. I mean, I had ribs tonight. Yes, I like meat on the bone. Tasty meats. Anyway, we are here for fairy tales, and we will read fairy tales as soon as my tail gets in order. So let me adjust my microphone. I don't need to point it towards me because you're picking me up pretty well now already. So I will tilt it back. I will tilt it towards my phone because I talk while looking at myself. Not that I have an ego or anything by all means, but hey, you never know. I'm going to try to do this so I can have some control over the... Why are you not coming out? No, I don't. Why is it doing that? There we go. Okay. I'm trying to get it so that I can control when that play and still be able to see chat. Okay. Now we'll get off there. You higher. Okay, now I can... No, I don't want to watch a freaking video right now. Go away. Anyway, everyone who is here and everyone who is not here who wishes they were here, which it should be everyone. We're going to get into the fairy tales. And our first fairy tale for the night is no, Kel, I'm busy. The Bear from the Grey Fairy book. Once upon a time, there was a king who had an only daughter. He was so proud and so fond of her that he was in constant terror that something would happen to her if she went outside of the palace, and thus, owing to his own great love for her, forced her to lead the life of a prisoner, shut up within her own rooms. The princess did not like this at all, and one day she complained about it very bitterly to her nurse. Now, the nurse was a witch, though the king did not know it. For some time she listened and tried to soothe the princess, but when she saw that she could not be comforted, she said to her, "Your father loves you very dearly, as you know. Whatever you were to ask from him, he would give you. The one thing he will not grant you is permission to leave the palace. And now, do as I tell you. Go to your father and ask him to give you the wooden wheelbarrow and a bear's skin. When you have got them, bring them to me, and I will touch them with my magic wand. The wheelbarrow will then move of itself, and will take you at full speed wherever you want to go, and the bearskin will make such a covering for you that no one will recognize you." So, the princess did as the witch advised her. The king, when he heard her strange request, was greatly astonished, and asked her what she meant to do with a wheelbarrow and a bearskin. And the princess answered, "You never let me leave the house. At least you might grant me this request." So the king granted it, and the princess went back to her nurse, taking the barrow and the bearskin with her. As soon as the witch saw them, she touched them with her magic wand, and in a moment the barrow began to move about in all directions. The princess next put on the bearskin, which so completely changed her appearance that no one could have known that she was a girl and not a bear. In this strange attire she seated herself on the barrow, and in a few minutes she found herself far away from the palace, and moving rapidly through a great forest. Here she stopped the barrow with a sign that the witch had shown her, and hid herself and it in a thick grove of flowering shrubs. Now it happened that the prince of the country was hunting with his dogs in the forest. Suddenly he caught sight of the bear hiding among the shrubs, and calling his dogs, hounded them to attack him. But the bear, seeing what peril she was in, cried, "Go off your dogs, or they will kill me. What harm have I ever done to you?" At these words, coming from a bear, the prince was so startled that for a moment he stood stock still. Then he said, quite gently, "Will you come with me? I will take you to my home." "I will come gladly," replied the bear, and seating herself in the barrow, it at once began to move in the direction of the prince's palace. You may imagine the surprise of the prince's mother when he saw her son return, accompanied by a bear, who had once set about doing the housework better than any servant that the queen had ever seen. Now, it happened that there were great festivities going on in the palace of the neighboring prince, and at dinner one day the prince said to his mother, "This evening there is to be a great ball to which I must go." And his mother answered, "Go and dance and enjoy yourself." Suddenly a voice came from under the table where the bear had rolled itself, as its wont. "Let me come to the ball. I too would like to dance." But the only answer the prince made was to give the bear a kick and to drive it from the room. In the evening the prince set off for the ball. As soon as he had started, the bear came to the queen and implored to be allowed to go to the ball, saying that she would hide herself so well that no one would know she was there. The kind-hearted queen could not refuse her. Then the bear ran to her barrow, threw off her bear skin, and touched it with the magic wand that the witch had given her. In a moment the skin was changed into an exquisite ball dress woven out of moonbeams, and the wheelbarrow was changed into a carriage drawn by 2 prancing steeds. Stepping into the carriage, the princess drove to the grand entrance of the palace, where she encountered the ballroom in her wondrous dress of moonbeams. She looked so lovely, so different from all the other guests, that everyone wondered who she was, and no one could tell where she had come from. From the moment he saw her, the prince fell desperately in love with her, and all the evening he would dance with no one else but the beautiful stranger. When the ball was over, the princess drove away in her carriage at full speed, for she wished to get home in time to change her ball dress into the bearskin and the carriage back into the wheelbarrow before anyone discovered who she was. The prince, putting spurs onto his horse, rode after her, for he was determined not to let her out of his sight. Then suddenly a thick mist arose and hid her from him. When he reached his home, he could talk to his mother of nothing else but the beautiful stranger with whom he had danced so often, and with whom he was so much in love with. And the bear beneath the table smiled to itself and muttered, "I am the beautiful stranger. Oh, how I have taken you in." The next evening there was a second ball, and, as you may believe, the prince was determined not to miss it, for he thought he would once more see the lovely girl and dance with her and talk to her, and make her talk to him, for at the first ball she had never opened her lips. And sure enough, as the music struck up the first dance, the beautiful stranger once more entered the room, looking even more radiant than the night before, for this time her dress was woven out of the rays of the sun. All evening the prince danced with her, but she never spoke a word. When the ball was over, he tried once more to follow her carriage, that he might know whence she came, but suddenly a great waterspout fell from the sky, and the blinding sheets of rain hid her from his sight. When he reached his home, he told his mother that he had again seen the lovely girl, and that this time she had been even more beautiful than the night before. And again the bear smiled beneath the table and muttered, "I have taken him in for a second time, and he has no idea that I am the beautiful girl with whom he is so much in love." On the next evening, the prince returned to the palace for the third ball, and the princess went too, and this time she had changed her bearskin into a dress woven out of starlight, studded all over with gems, and she looked so dazzling and so beautiful that everyone wondered at her, and she said that no one so beautiful had ever been seen there before. And the prince danced with her, and though he could not induce her to speak, he succeeded on slipping a ring onto her finger. When the ball was over, he followed her carriage and rode at such a pace that for long he kept it in sight. Then a terrible wind arose between him and the carriage, and he could not overtake it. When he reached his home, he said to his mother, "I do not know what has become of me. I think I shall go mad. I am so much in love with that girl, and I have no means of finding out who she is. I danced with her, and I gave her a ring, and yet I do not know her name, nor where I am to find her." Then the bear laughed beneath the table and muttered to itself. And the prince continued, "I am tired to death. Order some soup to be made for me, and I don't want that bear to meddle with it. Every time I speak of my love, that brute mutters and laughs, as it seems to mock me. I hate the sight of the very creature." When the soup was ready, the bear brought it to the prince. But before handing it to him, she dropped into the plate the ring the prince had given her the night before at the ball. The prince began to eat his soup very slowly and languidly, for he was sad at heart, and all his thoughts were busy, wondering how and where he could see the lovely stranger again. Suddenly he noticed the ring at the bottom of the plate. In a moment he recognized it, and was dumb with surprise. Then he saw the bear standing beside him, looking at him with gentle, beseeching eyes, and something in the eyes of the bear made him say, "Take off that skin. Some mystery is hidden beneath it." And the bear's skin dropped off, and the beautiful girl stood before him, in the dress woven out of the starlight, and he saw that she was the stranger with whom he had fallen so deeply in love. And now she appeared to him 1,000 times more beautiful than ever before, and he led her to his mother. And the princess told him and them her story, and how she had been kept shut up by her father in the palace, and how she had wearied of her imprisonment. And the prince's mother loved her, and rejoiced that her son should have so good and beautiful a wife. So they were married, and lived happily for many years, and reigned wisely over the kingdom. Not a bad story. Although if you find a woman wearing a bearskin, she might be a Zelkie. You never know. Gotta be careful with those fae. They're tricksy. Anyway. I hope the audio is sounding fine for you, because it still sounds a little tinny for me. Maybe it's just because I'm closer to the microphone and picking up the reverb in my headset. I don't know. Anyway, continuing on. Our wonderful second story for the evening, and definitely not a porn title, Jack, My Hedgehog, from the Green Fairy book. There was once a farmer who lived in great comfort. He had both lands and money, but though he was so well off, one thing was wanting to complete his happiness. He had no children. Many and many a time when he met other farmers at the nearest neighborhood markets, They would tease him, asking how it came about that he was childless. At length he grew so angry that he exclaimed, "I must have a child of some sort of kind, even should it only be a hedgehog." Sounds like a prick. Not long after this, his wife gave birth to a child. But though the lower half of the little creature was a fine boy, from the waist upwards it was a hedgehog. So that when his mother first saw him, she was quite frightened, and said to her husband, "There now, you have cursed the child yourself." The farmer said, "What's the use of making a fuss? I suppose the creature must be christened, but I don't see how we are to ask anyone to be sponsor of him. And what are we to call him?" "There's nothing we can possibly call him but Jack my Hedgehog," replied the wife. So they took him to be christened, and the parson said, "You'll never be able to put that child in a decent bed on account of his prickles." Which was true, but they shook down some straw for behind him in the stove, and then he was there to lay for 8 years. His father grew very tired of him, and often wished him dead. But he did not die, but lay on there year after year. Now, one day there was a big fair at the market town, and the farmer had meant to go. So he asked his wife what he should bring her from it. "Some meat and a couple of big loaves for the house," she said. And then he asked the maid what she wanted, and she said a pair of slippers and some stockings. Lastly said, "Well, Jack my Hedgehog, what shall I bring you?" "Daddy," he said, "do bring me a bagpipe." When the farmer came home, he gave his wife and the maid the things they had asked for. Then he went behind the stove and gave Jack my Hedgehog the bagpipes. When Jack had got his bagpipes, he said, "Daddy, do go to the smithy and have a housecock shod for me. And then I will ride off and trouble you no more." His father, who was delighted at the prospect of getting rid of him, had the cock shod, and when it was ready, Jack my Hedgehog mounted on its back and rode off to the forest, followed by all the pigs and asses which he had promised to look after. Having reached the forest, he made the cock fly up to the top of a very tall tree with him, and there he sat, looking after his pigs and donkeys, and he sat on and on for several years till he had quite a big herd. But all this time his father knew nothing of him. As he sat up in the tree, he played on his bagpipes and drew the loveliest music from them. As he was playing one day, a king who had lost his way happened to pass close by, and hearing the music he was much surprised, and sent one of his servants to find out where it had come from. The man peered about, but he could see nothing but a little creature which looked like a cock with a hedgehog perched on it, up in a tree. The king desired the servant to ask the strange creature why it sat there, and if he knew the shortest way to his kingdom. On this, Jack my Hedgehog stepped down from his tree and said he would undertake to show the king his way home, if the king, on his part, would give him his written promise to let him have whatever first met him on his return. The king thought to himself, that's easy enough to promise. The creature won't understand a word about it. so I can just write what I choose. He took a pen and ink and wrote something. And when he had done, Jack my Hedgehog pointed out the way, and the king got home safely. Now, when the king's daughter saw her father returning in the distance, she was so delighted that she ran to meet him, and threw herself into his arms. The king then remembered Jack my Hedgehog, and he told his daughter how he had been obliged to give a written promise to bestow whatever he first met when he got home to an extraordinary creature which had shown him the way. The creature, he said, rode on a cock as though it had been a horse, and it made lovely music, but as it certainly could not read, he had just written that he would not give it anything at all. At this the princess was quite pleased, and said how cleverly her father had managed. For that, of course, nothing would induce her to have gone off with Jack my Hedgehog. Meantime, Jack minded his asses and pigs, sat aloft in his tree, and played his bagpipes, and was always merry and cheery. After a time, it so happened that another king, having lost his way, passed by with his servants and escort, wondering how he could find his way home, for the forest was indeed very vast. He too heard the music, and told one of his men to find out whence it came. The man came under the tree, and looking up to the top, he saw Jack my Hedgehog astride on his cock. The servant asked Jack what he was doing up there. "I'm minding my pigs and donkeys, and what do you want?" was his reply. Then the servant told him that they had lost their way, and wanted someone to show it to them. Down came Jack my Hedgehog with his cock, and told the old king he would show him the right way, if he would solemnly promise to give him the first thing he met in front of his royal castle. The king said yes, and gave Jack a written promise to that effect. Then Jack rode on in front, pointing out the way, and the king reached his own country in safety. Now, he had an only daughter who was extremely beautiful, and who delighted at her father's return and ran to meet him, threw her arms around his neck, and kissed him heartily. Then she asked where he had been wandering so long, and he told her how he had lost his way, and might never have reached home, all but for a strange creature, half man and half hedgehog, which rode a cock that sat up in a tree making lovely music, and which he had shown him the right way. And he also told her how he had been obliged to pledge his word to give the creature the first thing which met him outside his castle gate, and he felt very sad at the thought that she had been the first thing to meet him. But the princess comforted him, and said she would be quite willing to go with Jack my Hedgehog whenever he came to fetch her, because of the great love she bore for her dear old father. Jack my Hedgehog continued to herd his pigs, and they increased in number till there were so many that the forest seemed full of them. So he made up his mind to live there no longer, and sent a message to his father telling him to have all the stables and the outhouses of the village cleared, as he was going to bring such an enormous herd that all who might kill what they choose. His father was much vexed at the news, for he thought Jack had died long ago. Jack my Hedgehog mounted his cock, and driving his pigs before him into the village, let everyone kill as many as they chose, and such a hacking and hewing of pork went on as you might have heard miles off. So much pork. Anyway, then Jack said, Daddy, let the blacksmith shoe my cock once more, then I'll ride off, and I promise you I'll never come back again as long as I live. So the father had the cock shod, and rejoiced at the idea of getting rid of his son. Then Jack my Hedgehog set off for the first kingdom, and there the king had given strict orders that if anyone should be seen riding a cock and carrying a bagpipe, he was to be chased away and shot at, and on no account be allowed to enter the palace. So when Jack my Hedgehog rode up to the guards, charged at him with their bayonets, but he put spurs to his cock and flew right over the gate and into the king's windows, let himself down on the sill, and called out that he was not given what he was promised. Both the king and his daughter should pay with their lives. Then the king coaxed and entreated his daughter to go with Jack, and so save both their lives. The princess dressed herself all in white, and her father gave her a coach with 6 horses, and servants in gorgeous liveries, and quantities of money. She stepped onto the couch, and Jack my Hedgehog, with his cock and pipes, took his place beside her. They both took leave, and the king fully expected never to set eyes on them again. But matters turned out very differently from what he had expected, for when they had gotten a certain distance from the town, Jack tore all the princess's smart clothes off of her, and pricked her all over with his bristles, saying, "That's what you get for your treachery. Now go back and have no more to say to you." Yeah. And with that he hunted her home, and she felt she had been disgraced and put to shame till her life's end. Then Jack my Hedgehog rode on with his cock and bagpipes to the country of the second king, to whom he had shown the way. Now this king had given orders that, in the event of Jack's coming, the guards were to present arms, the people to cheer, and he was to be conducted in triumph to the royal palace. When the king's daughter saw Jack my Hedgehog, she was a good deal startled, for he certainly was peculiar looking. But after all, she considered that she had given her word, and it couldn't be helped. So she made Jack welcome, and they sat and were betrothed to each other, and at dinner he sat next to her at the royal table, and they ate and they drank together. When they retired to rest, the princess feared lest Jack should kiss her because of his prickles, but he told her not to be alarmed, as no harm should befall her. Then he begged the old king to place a watch of 4 men just outside his bedroom door, and to desire them to make a big fire. When he was about to lie down in bed, he would creep out of his hedgehog skin and leave it lying at the bedside. Then the men must rush in, throw the skin into the fire, and stand by till it was entirely burnt up. And so it was, for when it struck 11, Jack my Hedgehog went to his room, took off his skin, and left it at the foot of the bed. The men rushed in, quickly seized the skin, and threw it on the fire. And directly it was all burnt, Jack was released from his enchantment, and lay in his bed a man from head to foot, but quite black as though he had been severely scorched. The king sent off for his physician in ordinary, who washed Jack all over with various essences and salves, so that he became white as a remarkably handsome young man. When the king's daughter saw him, she was greatly pleased, and next day the marriage ceremony was performed, and the old king bestowed his kingdom on Jack my Hedgehog. After some years, Jack and his wife went to visit his father, But the farmer did not recognize him and declared that he had no son. He had had one, but that was one born with bristles like a hedgehog, and had gone off into the wide world. Then Jack told his story, and his old father rejoiced, and returned to live with him in his kingdom. Sounds like his father was more of a prick than the hedgehog was. Oh, and I need a beverage. Oh. It's got a little bit of carbonation we'll see here. I do like a good sangria. I mean, who else would want a fruit punch wine? I mean, come on. Okay. How are we on time? Are we on time? 17 minutes before that's pre-order. I'm going to go ahead and run some ads now to get it out of the way. So, see you in a bit. Unless you're a sub, then I'll just hang out here with you. So, how's the microphone doing? To me, it still sounds a little tinny, but I'm hearing before the OSB filters. In fact, I'm going to turn on my fan under my desk to see what happens. I went under my desk. That's cute. Okay. Come back up. Anytime. There we go. Okay, my fan under my desk is on low. Does anyone actually hear it? Oh, one of you, which is probably Cal. Oh, excuse me. Oh, cool. Bill gets that there too. That's nice. I guess I really good tell people I'm on. I wonder if I'm being that. Oh, damn. Excuse me. Oh. So if I lean closer to my, I crawl under my desk. But you know. Oh, another flash of lightning. Dun. Okay. Okay, so it says that I've got another minute and 20 seconds of ads. And I don't know if anyone's here to... Why am I hiding my chat? I'm hiding. Okay. Okay, less than a minute. And 2 stories down so far, though. I'd say we're doing pretty good. Might do 2, maybe even a 3rd story tonight. Well, not 3rd, but still. Okay. Get the book open again. Okay, 20 seconds. Okay, it says we are clear. Cool. So, anyway. Our 3rd story for the night. The Adventures of a Jackal. From the Orange Fairy Book. In a country which is full of wild beasts of all sorts, there once lived a jackal and a hedgehog, and unlike though they were, the 2 animals made great friends, and were often seen in each other's company. One afternoon they were walking along the road together, when the jackal, who was the taller of the 2, exclaimed, "Hey, there's a barn full of corn. Let's go and eat some." "Let us do it," answered the hedgehog, and they went to the barn and ate till they could eat no more. Then the jackal put on his shoes, which he had taken off as to make no noise, and they returned to the high road. Jackals have shoes? After they had gone some way, and they met a panther, who stopped, and bowing politely, said, "Excuse my speaking to you, but I cannot help admiring those shoes of yours. Do you mind telling me who made them?" "Yes, I think they are rather nice," answered the jackal. "I made them myself, though." "Could you make me a pair like them?" asked the panther eagerly. "I will do my best, of course," replied the jackal. "But you must kill me a cow, and then we have eaten the flesh, I will take the skin and make your shoes out of it." So the panther prowled until he saw a fine cow gazing apart from the rest of the herd. He killed it instantly, and then gave a cry to the jackal and the hedgehog to come to the place where he was. They soon skinned the dead beast and spread its skin out to dry, after which they had a grand feast before they curled themselves up for the night and slept quite soundly. Next morning the jackal got up early and set to work upon the shoes, while the panther sat by and looked on with delight. At last they were finished, and the jackal arose and stretched himself. "Now go and lay them in the sun out there," he said. "In a couple of hours they will be ready to put on. But do not attempt to wear them before, or you will feel the most uncomfortable. But I see the sun is high in the heavens, and we must be continuing on our journey." The panther, who always believed what everyone told him, did exactly as he was bid, and in 2 hours' time he had begun to fasten the shoes. He was certain to set off his paws wonderfully, and stretched out his forepaws and looked at them with pride. But when he tried to walk, That was another story. They were so stiff and hard that he nearly shrieked with every step he took. At last he shrank down where he was and began to actually cry. After some time, some little partridges who were hopping by heard the panther's poor groans, and went up to see what was the matter. He had never tried to make his dinner of them, and they had always been quite friendly. "You seem in pain," said one of them, fluttering close to him. "Can we help you?" "Oh, it was the jackal. It made me these shoes. They're so hard and tight that they hurt my feet. I cannot manage to kick them off." "Lie still, and we will soften them," answered the kind little partridge. And calling to his brothers, they all flew to the nearest spring and carried water in their beaks, which they poured over the shoes. This they did till the leather grew soft, and the panther was able to slip out of his feet out of them. "Oh, thank you," he cried, skipping around with joy. "I feel a different creature. Now I will go after the jackal and pay him my debts." And he bounded away into the forest. But the jackal had been very cunning, and had trotted backwards and forwards and in and out, so that it was very difficult to know which track he had really followed. At length, however, the panther caught sight of his enemy, and at the same time the jackal had caught sight of him. The panther gave a loud roar and sprang forward, but the jackal was too quick for him, and plunged into a dense thicket where the panther could not follow. Disgusted with his failure, and more angry than ever, the panther lay down for a while to consider what he should do next. And as he was thinking, an old man came by. "Oh, father, tell me how I can repay the jackal for the way he has served me." And without more ado, he told his story. "Oh, you can take my advice," answered the old man. "You will kill a cow and invite all the jackals in the forest to the feast. Watch them carefully while they are eating, and you will see that most of them keep their eyes on their food. But if one of them glances at you, you will know that he was the traitor." Sound advice. The panther, whose manners were always good, thanked the old man and followed his counsel. The cow was killed, and the partridges flew about with invitations to the jackals, who gathered in large numbers to the feast. The wicked jackal came among them, but as the panther had only seen him once, he could not distinguish him from the rest. However, they all took their places on wooden seats placed around the dead cow, which was laid across the boughs of a fallen tree, and began their dinner, each jackal fixing his eyes greedily on the piece of meat before him. Only one of them seemed uneasy, and every now and then he glanced in the direction of his host. The panther noticed, and suddenly made a bound for the culprit and seized his tail. But again the jackal was too quick for him, and catching up a knife, he cut off his tail and darted into the forest, followed by all the rest of the party. And before the panther had recovered from his surprise, he found himself alone. "What am I to do now?" asked the old man, who came back to see how things had turned out. "It is very unfortunate, certainly," answered he, "but I think I know where you can find him. There's a melon garden about 2 miles from here, and as jackals are very fond of melons, they are nearly sure to have gone there to feed. If you see a tailless jackal, you will know that he is the one you want." So the panther thanked him and went on his way. Now the jackal had guessed what advice the old man would give his enemy, and so, while his friends were greedily eating the ripest melons on the sunniest corner of the garden, he stole behind them and tied their tails together. He had only finished when his ears caught the sound of breaking branches, and cried, "Quick! Quick! Here comes the master of the garden!" And the jackal sprang up and ran away in all directions, leaving their tails behind them. And how was the panther to know which was his enemy? None of them had any tails, he said to the old man. I am tired of hunting them. I shall leave them alone and go and catch something for my supper. Of course, the hedgehog had not been able to take part in any of these adventures, but as soon as all danger was over, the jackal went to look for his friend, whom he was lucky enough to find at home. "Ah, there you are," he said gaily. "I have lost my tail since I saw you last, and other people have lost theirs too, but that is no matter. I am hungry, so come with me to the shepherd who is sitting over there, and we will ask him to sell us one of his sheep." "Yes, that is a good plan," answered the hedgehog, and he walked as fast as his little legs would go to keep up with the jackal. When they reached the shepherd, the jackal pulled out his purse from under his foreleg and made his bargain. "I want to wait until tomorrow," said the shepherd, "and I will give you the biggest sheep you ever saw. And if he always feeds at some distance from the rest of the flock, it would not take me long to catch him." "Well, it is very tiresome, but I suppose I will wait," replied the jackal. And he and the hedgehog looked about for a nice dry cave in which to make themselves comfortable for the night. But after they had gone, the shepherd killed one of his sheep and stripped off his skin, which he sewed lightly around a greyhound he had with him, and put a cord around its neck. Then he lay down and went to sleep. Very, very early, before the sun was properly up, the jackal and the hedgehog were pulling up at the shepherd's cloak. "Wake up," they said, "and give us that sheep. We've had nothing to eat all night, and we're very hungry." The shepherd yawned and rubbed his eyes. "He's tied up to the tree. Go and take him." So they went to the tree and unfastened the cord, and turned to go back to the cave where they had slept, dragging the greyhound after them. When they reached the cave, the jackal said to the hedgehog, "Before we kill him, let me see whether he is fat or thin." And he stood a little way back, so that he might better examine the animal. After looking at him with his head on one side for a moment or two, he nodded gravely. "He is quite fat enough. He's a good sheep." But the hedgehog, who sometimes showed more cunning than anyone would have guessed, answered, "My friend, you are talking knowledge. The wool is indeed a sheep's wool, but the paws of my uncle the greyhound peep out from underneath." "He is a sheep," replied the jackal, who did not like to think anyone cleverer than himself. Hold the cord while I look at him," answered the hedgehog. Very unwillingly the jackal held the rope, while the hedgehog walked slowly around the greyhound until he had reached the jackal again. He grew quite well by his paws and tail that it was the greyhound and not a sheep that the shepherd had sold them. And as he could not tell what turn affairs might take, he resolved to get out of the way. "Oh, yes, you're right," he said to the jackal. "But I can never eat till I have first drunk. I will go and quench my thirst from that spring at the edge of the wood, and then I shall be ready for breakfast." "Don't be long, then," answered the jackal, and the hedgehog hurried off at its best pace, and he lay down under a rock to wait for him. More than an hour passed by, and the hedgehog had had plenty of time to go to the spring and back, and still there was no sign of him. And this was very natural, as he had hidden himself in some long grass under a tree. At length the jackal guessed that for some reason his friend had run away, and determined to wait for his breakfast no longer. So he went up to the place where the greyhound had been tethered and untied the rope. But just as he was about to spring on his back and give him a deadly bite, The jackal heard a low growl, which never proceeded from the throat of any sheep that I know of. Like a flash of lightning, the jackal threw down the cord and was flying across the plain. Though his legs were long, the greyhound's legs were longer. Still, and he soon came up with his prey. The jackal turned to fight, but he was no match for the greyhound, and in a few minutes he was lying dead on the ground, while the greyhound was trotting peacefully back to the shepherd. Poor jackal. I mean, sure, he made the panther shoes, and the panther just got pissy about it. Lost his tail. Gotta keep those tails. They're important. Anyway. Let's go and get into the next one, because it might be a sequel. It is actually a sequel, because it is The Adventures of the Jackal's Eldest Son from the Orange Fairy book. Now, though the jackal was dead, he had left 2 sons behind him, every whit as cunning and as tricky as their father. The elder of the 2 was a fine, handsome creature, who had a pleasant manner and made many friends. An animal he saw most was a hyena, and one day, when they were taking a walk together, they picked up a beautiful green cloak, which was evidently dropped by some rider on accident when crossing a plain on a camel. Of course, each wanted to have it, and they almost quarreled over the matter. But at length it was settled that the hyena should wear the cloak by day, and the jackal by night. After a little while, however, the jackal became discontented with this arrangement, declaring that none of his friends, who were quite different than those of the hyena, could see the splendor of the mantle, and that it was only fair that he should sometimes be allowed to wear it by the day. To this the hyena would by no means consent, and they were on the end of the quarrel when the hyena proposed that they should ask the lion to judge between them. The jackal agreed to this, and the hyena wrapped the cloak about him, and they both trotted off to the lion's den. The jackal, who was fond of talking, at once told the story, and when it was finished the lion turned to the hyena and asked if it were true. "Quite true, your majesty," answered the hyena. "Then lay the cloak at the ground at my feet," said the lion, "and I will give my judgment." So the mantle was spread upon the red earth, the hyena and the jackal standing on each side of it. There was a silence for a few moments, and then the lion sat up, looking very great and wise. "My judgment is that the garment shall belong wholly to whoever first rings the bell of the nearest mosque at dawn tomorrow. Now go, for much business awaits me." All that night the hyena sat up, fearing lest the jackal should reach the bell before him, for the mosque was close at hand. With the first streak of dawn he pounded away at the bell, just as the jackal, who had slept soundly at night, was rising to his feet. "Good luck to you!" cried the jackal. Throwing the cloak over his back, he darted away across the plain, and was no more seen by his friend the hyena. After running several miles, the jackal thought he was safe from pursuit, and seeing a lion and another hyena walking together, he strolled up to join them. "Good morning," he said. "May I ask what is the matter? You seem very serious about something." "Pray sit down," he said. "May I ask what is the matter? You seem very serious about something." "No, wait. Sorry. Pray sit down," answered the lion. "We were wondering in which direction we should go to find the best dinner. The hyena wishes to go to the forest, and I to the mountains. What do you say?" Well, as I was sauntering across the plain just now, I noticed a flock of sheep grazing, and some of them had wandered into a little valley quite out of sight of the shepherd. If you keep among the rocks, you will never be observed, but perhaps you will allow me to go with you and show you the way. You are really very kind, answered the lion, and they crept steadily along, till at length they reached the mouth of the valley where the ram, sheep, and a lamb were feeding on such rich grass, completely unconscious of the danger. How shall we divide them? Asked the lion, and whispered to them. Oh, it is easily done, replied the hyena. The lamb for me, the sheep for the jackal, and the ram for the lion. So, I am to have the lean creature, with nothing but horns, am I? Cried the lion in a rage. I will teach you to divide things in such a manner. And he gave the hyena 2 great blows, which stretched him dead in a moment. And then he turned to the jackal and said, How would you divide them? Oh, quite differently from the hyena, replied the jackal. You will breakfast off the lamb, and you will dine off the sheep, and you will sup off the ram. Dear me, how clever you are. Who taught you such wisdom? Exclaimed the lion, looking at him admirably. The fate of the hyena, answered the jackal, laughing and running off at his best speed, for he saw 2 men with spears coming close behind the lion. The jackal continued to run till at last he could run no longer. He flung himself under a tree, panting for breath, when he heard a rustle among the grass, and his father's old friend, the hedgehog, appearing before him. Oh, it is you, asked the little creature. How strange that we should meet so far from home. I've just had the narrow escape of my life, gasped the jackal, and I need some sleep. After that we must think of something to do to amuse ourselves. And he lay down again, and slept soundly for a couple of hours. Now I am ready, he said. Have you anything to propose? In a valley behind those trees, answered the hedgehog, there's a small farmhouse where the best butter in the world is made. I know their ways, and it's an hour's time the farmer's wife will be off to milk the cows, which she keeps at some distance. We could easily get in the window of the shed where she keeps the butter, and I will watch, lest someone should come unexpectedly while we have a good meal. Then you shall watch, and I will eat. That sounds like a good plan, replied the jackal, and off they set off together. But when they reached the farmhouse, the jackal said to the hedgehog, Go on and fetch the pots of butter, and I will hide them in a safe place. Oh, no, cried the hedgehog. I really couldn't. They would find out directly. Besides, it is so different just eating a little now and then. Do as I bid you at once, said the jackal, looking at the hedgehog so sternly that the little fellow dared to say no more, and soon rolled the jars to the window, where the jackal lifted them out one by one. When they were all in a row before him, he gave a sudden start. Run for your life, he whispered to his companion. I see the woman coming over the hill. And the hedgehog, his heart beating, set off as fast as he could. The jackal remained where he was, shaking with laughter, for the woman was not in sight at all, and he had only sent the hedgehog away because he did not want him to know where the jars of butter were buried. But every day he stole out of their hiding place and had a delicious feast. At length one morning the hedgehog suddenly said, You never told me what you did with those jars. Oh, I hid them safely till the farm people should have forgotten all about them, replied the jackal. But as they're still searching for them, we must wait a little longer, and then I'll bring some home, and we shall share them between us. So the hedgehog waited and waited, but every time he asked where they were, there was no chance of getting the jars of butter. The jackal did not put him off with some excuse. After a while, the hedgehog finally became suspicious and said,
I should like to know where you have hidden them. Tonight, when it is quite dark, you shall show me the place.
I can't really tell you, answered the Jackal. You talk too much that you might be sure to confide the secret to someone, and then we should have our trouble for nothing. Besides, running the risk of our necks being broken by the farmer. I can see that he is getting disheartened, and very soon he will give up the search. Have patience. Just a little longer. The hedgehog said no more, and pretended to be satisfied. But when some days had gone, he woke the jackal, who was sleeping soundly after a hunt, which had lasted several hours.
I just had notice, remarked the hedgehog, shaking him, that my family wish to have a banquet tomorrow, and they have invited you to it. Will you come?
Certainly, said the jackal, with pleasure. But I have to go out in the morning, and you can meet me on the road.
That will do very well,
replied the hedgehog, and the jackal went to sleep again, and he was obliged to be up early. Punctual to the moment, the hedgehog arrived at the place appointed to the meeting, and as the jackal was not there yet, he sat down and waited for him.
Ah, there you are,
he cried when a dusky yellow form had last turned the corner.
I had nearly given up on you. Indeed, I almost wish you had not come, for I hardly know where I should hide you.
Why should you hide me anywhere? Answered the jackal. What is the matter with you?
Well, so many of the guests have brought their dogs and mules with them, and I fear it may hardly be safe for you to be among them. No, don't run off that way, he answered quickly, because there is another troop that are coming over the hill. Lie down here and I will throw the sacks over you, and keep you safe for a little while, whatever happens.
And what did happen was, and then the jackal was lying covered up underneath the little hill, and the hedgehog set some great stone rolling, which crushed him to death. Of course, this too has a follow-up. And we begin with the adventures of the younger son of the jackal from the Orange Fairy book as well. Now that the father and elder brother were both dead, all that was left of the jackal family was one son, who was no less cunning than the others had been. He did not like staying in the same place any better than they, and nobody ever knew in what part of the country he might be found next. One day when he was wandering about, he beheld a nice fat sheep, which was cropping the grass and seemed quite contented with her lot. "Good morning," said the jackal. "I'm so glad to see you. I have been looking for you everywhere."
For me? Answered the sheep in an astonished voice. But we have never met before.
No, but I have heard of you. Oh, you don't know what fine things I have heard. And, well, some people have all the luck.
You are very kind, I am sure, answered the sheep, not knowing which way to look. Is there any way in which I can help you?
There is something that I had my heart set on, though I hardly like to propose it on such a short acquaintance. But from what people have told me, I thought that you and I might keep house together comfortably, if you would only agree to try. I have several fields belonging to me, and if they are kept well watered, they bear wonderful crops.
Well, perhaps I might come for a short time, said the sheep, with a little hesitation. If we do not get on, we can part company.
Oh, thank you, cried the jackal. Do not let us lose a moment. And he held out his paw in such an inviting manner that the sheep got up and trotted beside him until they reached home. Now, said the jackal, you go to the well and fetch the water, and I will pour it into the trenches that run between the patches of corn. and he did so, he sang lustily. The work was very hard, and the sheep did not grumble, and by was regarded as seeing little green heads poking themselves out of the earth. After that hot sun ripened them quickly, and soon harvest was come, and the grain was cut, and the ground was ready for sale. When everything was complete, the jackal said to the sheep, "Now let us divide it, so that we can each do what they like with their share."
"Yes, you do it," answered the sheep. "Here are the scales. You must weigh it carefully."
So the jackal began to weigh it, and when he had finished, he counted out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parts for the jackal, and 1 part for the sheep. If she likes it, she can take it. If not, she can leave it. The sheep looked at the 2 heaps in silence, one so large and the other so small. And then she answered,
"Wait a minute, while I fetch some sacks to carry away my share."
But it was not sacks that the sheep wanted, for as soon as the jackal could no longer see her, she set forth at her best pace to the home of the greyhound, where she arrived panting with haste she made.
"Good uncle, help me, I pray you,"
she cried as soon as she could speak. "Why? What is the matter?" asked the greyhound, looking up from astonishment.
"I beg you to return to me and frighten the jackal into paying me what he owes me," answered the sheep. "For months we have lived together, and I have twice every day drawn the water, while he only poured it into the trenches. Together we have reaped our harvest, and now, when the moment to divide our crop has come, he has taken 7 parts for himself and left me only 1.
She finished, and giving herself a twist, passed her woolly tail across her eyes. While the greyhound watched her, he held his place. Then he said, "Bring me a sack." And the sheep hastened away to fetch one. Very soon she returned and laid the sack down before him. "Open it wide, that I may get inside," cried he. And when he was comfortably rolled up inside, he bade the sheep take him on her back, and hastened to the place where she had left the jackal. She found him waiting for her, and pretending to be asleep, though she clearly saw him wink one of his eyes. However, she took no notice, and throwing the sack roughly to the ground, she exclaimed,
"Now measure!"
At this, the jackal got up, and going to the heap of grain which lay close by, he divided it again into 8 portions, 7 for himself, and 1 for the sheep.
"What are you doing that for?" asked the sheep indignantly. "You know quite well that it was I who drew the water, and you only poured it into the trenches."
"You are mistaken," answered the jackal. "It was I who drew the water, and you who poured it into the trenches. Anyone will tell you that. If you like, I will ask the people who are digging there."
"Very well,"
replied the sheep, and the jackal called out, "Hey, you diggers, tell me, who was it you heard singing over the work?" "Why, it was you, of course, Jackal. You sang loud that the whole world might have heard you." "And who is it that sings, he who draws up the water and he who empties it?" "Oh, it is certain he who draws the water." "You hear," said the jackal, turning to the sheep. "Now come and carry away your portion, or else I shall take it for myself."
"You have gotten the better of me," answered the sheep, "and I suppose I must confess myself beaten. But as I bear no malice, go and eat some of the dates that I have brought back in the sack." And the jackal, who loved dates, ran instantly back and tore open the mouth of the sack. But just as he was about to plunge in his nose, he saw 2 brown eyes calmly looking back at him. In an instant he had let fall the flap of the sack and bounded back where the sheep was standing. "I was only in fun, and you have brought back my uncle and a greyhound. Take away the sack, and we will make the division over again." And he began rearranging the heaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for my mother's sheep, and 1 for the jackal, he counted, casting timid glances all the while at the sack. Now you can take your share and go, said the sheep. And the jackal did not need twice telling. Whenever the sheep looked up, she still saw him flying across the plains. And, for all I know, he may be flying across it still. My friends just came on, and their ads were blaring in my ears. Oh, do we do another story? The story is 9 pages, give or take a paragraph. One more, tie us off until 11. So, our last story for the evening. Dapplegrim, from the Red Fairy book. There once upon a time was a couple of rich folks who had 12 sons. And when the youngest was grown up, he would not stay at home any longer, and would go out to the world to seek his fortune. His father and mother said that they thought that he was very well off at home, and that he was welcome to stay with them. But he could not rest, and said that he must and would go, so at last they gave him leave. When he had walked a long way, he came to a king's palace. There he asked for a place, and got it. Now the daughter of the king of that country had been carried off into the mountains by a troll, and the king had no other children, and for this cause both he and his people were full of sorrow and affliction. And the king had promised the princess and half his kingdom to anyone who could set her free. But there was no one who would go, though a great number had tried. When the youth had been there for the space of a year or so, he wanted to go home again and pay visits to his parents. But when he got there, his father and mother were dead, and his brothers had divided everything their parents had possessed between themselves, so that there was nothing at all left for him. Shall I then receive nothing at all of my inheritance? That's the youth. Who could know that you were still alive, you who have been a wanderer so long? Answered the brothers. However, there are 12 mares upon the hill which we have not yet divided among us. If you would like to have them for your share, you may take them. So the youth, well pleased with this, thanked them, and at once set off to the hill where the 12 mares were pastured. When he got up there and he found them, each mare had her foal, and by one side of them was a big dapple-gray foal, which was so sleek that it shone again. Well, my little foal, you are a fine fellow, said the youth. Yes, but if you kill all the other little foals so that I can suck at the mares for a year, you shall see how big and handsome I shall be then, said the foal. So the youth did this. He killed all 12 foals, and then he went again. Next year, when he came home again to look after his mares and the foal, it was as fat as it could be, but its coat shone with brightness,
and it was so big that the lad had the greatest difficulty in getting on its back. Each of the mares had had another foal. "Well, it's evident that I've lost nothing in letting you suck all the mares," the lad said to the yearling. "Now that you are quite big enough, you must come away with me." "No," said the colt. "I must stay here another year. Kill the 12 little foals, and then I can suck all the mares this year also. And you shall see how big and handsome I shall be next summer." So the youth did it again, and when he went up the hill next year to look after his colt and the mares, each of the mares had her foal again, but the dappled colt was so big that when the lad wanted to feel its neck to see how fat it was, he could not reach up to it. It was so high, and it was so bright that the light glanced off of its coat. "Big and handsome as you were last year, my colt, but this year you are ever so much handsomer," said the youth. "In all the king's court there is no such horse to be found, and now you shall come away with me." "No," replied the dappled colt once more. "I must stay here another year. You must kill the 12 little foals again, so that I may suck the mares this year also, and then come and look for me in the summer." So the youth did it again, and he killed all the little foals, and then went home again. But next year, when he returned to look after the dappled colt and the mares, he was quite appalled. He had never imagined that any horse could become so big and overgrown, for the dappled horse had to lie down on all fours before the youth could get on his back. And it was very hard to do that even when it was lying down. And it was so plump that the coat shone so and glistened that it had been as if a looking glass. This time the dappled horse was not unwilling to go away with the youth, so he mounted it, and when he came riding to his brothers, they all smote their heads together and crossed themselves, for never in their lives had they seen or heard tell of a horse as that. "If you procure me the best shoes for my horse, and the most magnificent saddle and bridle that can be found," said the youth, "you may all have my 12 mares that are standing out on the hill, and their 12 foals into the bargain." For this year also each mare had a foal. The brothers were quite willing to do this, so the lad got such shoes for his horse that the sticks and stones flew high up in the air as they rode away over the hills, and such a gold saddle and such a gold bridle that they could be seen glittering and glancing from afar. "Now we will go to the king's palace," said Dapplegrim. That was the horse's name. "But bear in mind that you must ask the king for a good stable and excellent fodder for me." So the lad promised not to forget to do that. He rode to the palace, and it was easily understood that with such a horse he had not long in the way. When he arrived there, the king was standing out on the steps, and how did he stare at the man who came riding up! Nay, never in my whole life have I seen such a man and such a horse, said the king. When the youth inquired if he could come to have a place in the palace, the king was so delighted that he could have danced on the steps where he was standing, and there was the lad was told that he should have a place. "Yes, but I must have a good stable and the most excellent fodder for my horse." So they told him that he should have sweet hay and oats, and as much of them as the dappled horse chose to have, and all the other riders had to take their horses out from the stable that Dapplegrim might stand alone, and really have plenty of room. But this did not last long, for the other people in the king's court became envious of the lad, and there was no bad thing that they could have not done to him that he had but dared. At last they bethought themselves of telling the king that the youth had said that, if he so chose, he was quite able to rescue the princess, who had been carried off to the mountains long ago by the troll. The king immediately summoned the lad into his presence and said that he had been informed that the lad had said this was in his power and to rescue the princess. So now he was to do it. If he succeeded in this, he no doubt knew that the king had promised his daughter and half the kingdom to anyone who set her free, which promise should be faithfully and honorably kept. But if he failed, he should be put to death. The youth denied that he had said this, but all to no purpose, for the king was deaf to all his words, so there was nothing to be done, save that he would make the attempt. He went down to the stable, and was very sad and full of care. Then Dapplegrim inquired why he was so troubled, and the youth told him, and said that he did not know what to do. For as far as setting the princess free, that was downright impossible. "Oh, it might be done," said Dapplegrim. "I will help you, but you must have me well shod. You must ask for 10 pounds of iron and 12 pounds of steel for my shoeing, and 1 smith to hammer and 1 to hold." So the youth did this, and no one said nay. They both got the iron and steel and the smiths, and thus Dapplegrim stood shod strongly and well, and when the youth went out of the king's palace, a cloud of dust rose up behind him. But when he came to the mountain which the princess had been carried, the difficulty was to ascend the precipitous wall of rock by which he has to get to the mountain beyond. For the rock stood right up on end, as steep as the side of a house, and as smooth as a sheet of glass. The first time the youth rode up it, he got a little way up the precipice, but then both Dapplegrim's forelegs slipped, and the horse came down with rider and sound like thunder among the mountains. The next time that he rode it, he got a little farther up, but then one of Dapplegrim's forelegs slipped, and down they went for the seconds of a landship. The third time Dapplegrim said, "Now we must show what we can do," and went it again once more till the stones sprang up sky high, and thus they got up. Then the lad rode into the mountain cleft at full gallop, and caught the princess on his saddle bow, and then out again before the troll even had time to stand up. And thus the princess was set free. When the youth returned to the palace, the king was both happy and delighted to get his daughter back again, as easily may be believed, but somehow or other the people at the court had so worked on him that he was angry with the lad as well. "Thou shalt have my thanks for setting my princess free," said he, when the youth came into the palace with her, and was about to go away. "She ought to be just as much of a princess as she is yours now, for you are a man of your word," said the youth. "Yes, yes," said the king. "Have her thou shalt, as I have said, but first of all, thou must make the sun shine into my palace here." For there was a large and high hill outside the windows, over which shadowed the palace so much that the sun could not shine in. "That was not part of our bargain," answered the youth. "But as nothing that I can say will move you, I suppose I shall have to try to do my best, for the princess I will have." So he went down to Dapplegrim again and told him what the king had desired. And Dapplegrim thought that it might be easily done. But first of all he must have new shoes, and 10 pounds of iron and 12 pounds of steel must go into the making of them, and 2 smiths were also necessary once more, 1 to hammer and 1 to hold. And then it would be very easy to make the sun shine into the king's palace. The lad asked for these things and obtained them instantly, for the king thought that for very shame he could not refuse to give them. And so Dapplegrim got new shoes, and they were good ones. The youth seated himself upon him, and once more they went their way. And for each hop that Dapplegrim made, down went the hill 15 ells into the earth. And so they went on until there was no hill left for the king to see. When the youth came down again, the king's palace, he asked the king if the princess should be his at last or not. For now no one could say that the sun was not shining into the palace. But the other people in the palace had again stirred up the king, and he answered that the youth should have her, and that he should have never intended that he should not. But first of all he must get her quite as good a horse to ride to the wedding on as which he had himself. The youth said that the king was never told him that he had to do that, and it seemed again that he had now really earned the princess. But the king stuck it, so what he had said, and if the youth was unable to do this, he would lose his life. The youth went down to the stable again, and very sad and sorrowful he was, as anyone might as well expect. Then he told Dapplegrim that the king had now required that he should get the princess as good a bridle horse as that which the bridegroom had, or he should lose his life. But that shall be no easy thing to do, he said, for your equal is not to be found in the world. Yes, there is one to match me, said Dapplegrim, but it will not be easy to get him, for he is underground. However, we will try. You must now go up to the king and ask for new shoes for me. And for them we must again have 10 pounds of iron and 12 pounds of steel, and the 2 smiths. One to hammer and one to hold, of course. But be very particular to see that the hooks are very sharp. And you must also ask for 12 barrels of rye, 12 started oxen. We must have them with us. And all of the 12 ox hides with 12 spiked barrels set in each of them. All of these things we must have. Likewise, a barrel of tar with 12 tons of tar in it. The youth went to the king and asked for all the things that Dapplegrim had named, and once more, as the king thought it would be disgraceful to refuse them to him, he obtained all of them. So he mounted Dapplegrim and rode away from the court, and when he had ridden for a long, long time over hills and moors, Dapplegrim asked him, "Do you hear anything?" "Yes, there's such a dreadful whistling up above in the air that I think I am growing alarmed," said the youth. "That is all the wild birds in the forest flying about. They are sent to stop us," said Dapplegrim. "But just cut a hole in the corn sacks, and then they will be so busy with the corn that they will forget all about us." The youth did it. He cut holes in the corn sacks so that the barley and rye ran out on every side. And all the wild birds that were in the forest came in such numbers that they darkened the sun. But when they caught sight of the corn, they could not refrain from it, but flew down and began to scratch and peck at all the corn and rye, and at last they all began to fight among themselves, and forgot all about the youth and Dapplegrim, and did them no harm. And the youth rode onwards for a long, long time, over hill and dale, over rocky places and morasses. And then Dapplegrim began to listen again, and asked the youth if he heard anything now. "Yes, I hear such a dreadful crackling and crashing in the forest on every side. I think that I shall really be afraid," said the youth. "And that is all the wild beasts in the forest," said Dapplegrim. "They are sent out to stop us. But just throw out the 12 carcasses of the oxen, and they will be so much occupied with them that they will quite forget about us." So the youth sent out the carcasses of the oxen, And then all the wild beasts in the forest, both bears and wolves and lions and grim beasts of all kinds, came. But when they caught sight of the carcasses, the oxen, they began to fight for them, till the blood flowed, and they completely forgot about Dapplegrim and the youth. So the youth rode onwards again, and many, many were the new scenes they saw, for traveling on Dapplegrim's back was not traveling slowly, as may be imagined. And then Dapplegrim neighed. "Do you hear anything?" he said. "Yes, I heard something like a foal neighing quite plainly, a long, long way off." "That's a full-grown colt," said Dapplegrim, "if you hear it so plainly when it's so far, far away from us." So they travelled onwards a long time, and saw one new scene after another once more. Then Dapplegrim neighed again. "Do you hear anything now?" he said. "Yes, now I heard it quite distinctly, and it neighed like a full-grown horse," said the youth. "Yes, and you will hear it soon again, very soon," said Dapplegrim. "And then you will hear what a voice it really has." So they travelled on through many more different kinds of countries, and then Dapplegrim neighed for the third time. But before he could ask the youth if he heard anything, there was such a neighing on the other side of the heath that the youth thought the hills and rocks would be rent to pieces. "Now there he is," said Dapplegrim. "Be quick and fling me over to the oxides to the other side of the spikes of them. Throw the 12 tons of tar over the field, and climb up on the great spruce fir tree. When he comes, fire will spurt out on both sides of his nostrils, and then the tar will catch fire." Now, mark that I say, if the fire ascends, I conquer. If it sinks, I fail. But if you see that I am winning, fling the bridle, which you must take off me, over his head, and then he will become quite gentle. Just as the youth had flung all the hides with the spikes over Dapplegrim, and the tar over the field, he got up safely in the spruce shire. A horse came with flames spouting from his nostrils, and the tar caught fire in a moment, and Dapplegrim and the horse began to fight until stones leapt up into the sky. They bit and they fought with their forelegs and their hind legs, and sometimes the youth looked at them. And sometimes he looked at the tar, but at the last of the flames began to rise, for wherever the strange horse bit, or whoever kicked, he hit a spot in the spikes of the hide. And at length he had to yield. When the youth saw that, he was not long in getting down from the tree and flinging the bridle over the horse's head, and then he became so tame that he might have been led by a thin string. This horse was dappled too, and so like Dapplegrim that no one could distinguish one from the other. The youth seated himself on the dappled horse which he had just captured, and rode home again to the king's palace, and Dapplegrim ran loose by his side. When he got there, the king was standing outside in the courtyard. "Can you tell me which horse I have caught, and which one is the one I had before?" said the youth. "If you can't, I think your daughter is mine." The king went and looked at both the dappled horses. He looked high and he looked low. He looked before and he looked behind, but there was not a hair's difference between the two. "No," said the king, "I cannot tell thee, and as thou hast procured such a splendid bridal horse for my daughter, thou shalt have her. But first we must have one more trial, just to see if thou art fated to have her. She shall hide herself twice, and then thou shalt hide thyself twice. If thou canst find her each time that she hides herself, And if she cannot find thee in thy hiding places, then it is fated, and thou shalt have the princess. That, too, was not in our bargain, said the youth. But we will make this trial, since it must be done. So the king's daughter was to hide herself. Then she changed herself into a duck, and lay swimming in a lake that was just outside the palace. But the youth went down into the stable and asked Dapplegrim what she had done with herself. Oh, all you have to do is take your gun and go down to the water and aim at the duck which is swimming about there, and she will discover herself, said Dapplegrim. The youth snatched up his gun and ran to the lake. We'll just have to shoot at that duck, he said, and begins to aim. Oh, no, dear friend, don't shoot at his eyes, said the princess. So he had found her once. The second time the princess changed herself into a loaf, and laid herself on the table among 4 other loaves. And then she was so like the other loaves that no one could see any difference between them. But the youth again went down to the stable to Dapplegrim, and told him that the princess had hidden herself again, and that he had not the least idea what had become of her. Oh, just take a large bread knife, sharpen it, and pretend that you are going to cut straight through the third of the 4 loaves which are lying on the kitchen table in the king's palace. Count them right to left, and you will soon find her, said Dapplegrim. So the youth went to the kitchen and began to sharpen the largest bread knife that he could find. And then he caught hold of the 3rd loaf on the left-hand side, and put the knife to it as if he meant to cut it straight in 2. I'll have a bit of this bread for myself, he said. No, dear friend, don't cut, it is I, said the princess again. So he had found her a second time. And now it was his turn to go and hide himself. Dapplegrim had given him such good instructions that it was not easy to find him. First he turned himself into a horsefly and hid himself in Dapplegrim's left nostril. The princess went poking about and searching everywhere, high and low, and wanted to go to Dapplegrim's stall too, but he began to bite and kick about, so she was afraid to go in there with him, and could not find the youth. Well, she said, I am unable to find you. You must show yourself. Whereupon the youth appeared, standing there on the stable floor. Dapplegrim told him that he was to do the second time, and he turned himself into a lump of earth, and stuck himself between the hoof and shoe of Dapplegrim's left forefoot. Once more the king's daughter went and sought everywhere, inside and out, until at last she came to the stable, and wanted to go into the stall beside Dapplegrim. So this time he allowed her to go in, and she peered about high and low, but she could not look under his hooves, for he stood much too firmly for his legs to do that, and she could not find the youth. Well, you'll just have to show yourself where you are, for I can't find you, said the princess. And in an instant the youth was standing by her side on the floor in the stable. Now you are mine, he said to the princess. Now you can see that it is fated that she should be mine, he said to the king. Yes, fated is it, said the king. What is, must be. Then everything was made ready for the wedding, with great splendor and promptitude, and the youth rode to church on Dapplegrim, and the king's daughter on the other horse. So everyone must see that they could not be long on their way there. Okay, it is almost 11, so I would say it's a good time to stop. So many friends have gone online since I was reading. So let me go to the bookstore again. And does anyone have any suggestions at all where we might raid? Anyone? Anyone? There's a Cub in chat. There was a Cub in chat. I just noticed that it was already gone. And excuse me because I did not mean to burp that loudly. Sangria. So, who's on? Who's on? I don't know. I know that Dusk is on because I heard her coming when I was doing stuff. Bingo? Holy shit, that's loud. Nope, Pink Steel was not on either. Man, I hate it when ads just start blaring out of nowhere. I think Dusk is playing with friends right now. I don't see any others of the gang on. It's kind of weird. It's Friday night, so I mean, that's why we're doing Friday Night Fairy Tales, right? Anyway, this will be an interesting VOD to listen to now that I get to see what this microphone sounds like. Doors on. Playing Raft. Aldridge is doing the lobby. Okay. It's reading. Yeah, let's go in right Dusk. Nope, she's in gremlin mode. Okay. Let me get this window back up lungs. Which is to say here. Let me. Oh, it's not. The ads because they're about to roll again. Why is this not letting me? Okay, apparently I can't move. I can't. There it is. Okay. So, anyone who might or may not be here. Oh, raid. Followers. Or raid. For those WWs. And we will go check out Dusk. And thank you all for coming for Friday Night Fairy Tales. We will be back again Thursday with more Sherlock Holmes. I may or may not stream some more gameplaying over the weekend, since Tony was so nice to pass me that Xbox Live card. I can actually get online and play with some friends. So I may be riding with Dead Rabbits again tomorrow. Which would be cool. Because it's, silver service on Saturdays, I think. Yeah, basically we sort of do good deeds on Saturdays to balance out all the, countless murders we do the rest of the week. Anyway, I will see you all over in Dusks. So I hope you all have a great night, afternoon, morning, whichever you may be having. And I will try to get all of my stuff on OBS updated properly so it looks right. So I'll see you all sometime later. Have a good night, afternoon, morning, whichever you may have. And I will have far too much fun with a microphone. Because I can almost hear myself properly. I don't know if anyone can hear the fan. I've had it on since I crawled under the desk earlier. I don't hear it, but you never know how things are going to go. Anyway, off to dusk. Go on, shoot. Da, 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 da. If you like me, subscribe. Do have the subathon on the 26th. Please be there. It's going to be an afternoon thing instead of an evening thing, so hopefully more people can show up. But yeah. Hasta la vista. Until we meet again. Happy trails to you.